Philadelphia Eagles. Week 18 arrives every year with a strange feeling. It's that moment when the regular season officially ends. But for some teams, the game itself feels almost irrelevant. The playoff spot is already secured, the division title is locked up, and the priority shifts to health, rest, and preparation. But in Philadelphia, as you know very well, there is no such thing as a meaningless game. There is no small stage. And most importantly, there is no silence when something drifts even slightly from the expected script. The Eagles enter Week 18 with an 11-5 record, NFC East champion, and a guaranteed playoff berth. Technically, the main objective has already been accomplished. Nick Sirianni decided to rest his starters in the regular season finale, a decision that makes perfect sense from a strategic standpoint. The focus is on the playoffs, not on a matchup that, on paper, doesn't change the team's immediate destiny. But that decision opens the door to something far bigger than simply resting starters. It creates a stage. And in the NFL, a stage always means evaluation, narrative, and consequence. Taking over the offense on Sunday is Tanner McKee, a third-year pro, a sixth-round pick, a quarterback out of Stanford, and a name most fans recognize more by association than by spotlight. McKee isn't the kind of player who generates daily headlines, isn't surrounded by hype, doesn't sell jerseys, and rarely comes up in national debates. But precisely because of that, Week 18 represents something massive. When asked about the opportunity, McKee was direct, with no buzzwords and no exaggeration. He said that anytime you step on the field, you want to put your best foot forward, that he's not thinking about what this could lead to, but about performing. That answer says a lot. It says he understands the size of the opportunity, but also understands his role. And in the NFL, that combination is rare. What many people forget is that this situation isn't new for him. Tanner McKee has already lived through something very similar. Last season, once again in Week 18, the Eagles chose to rest their starter. At that time, Jalen Hurts was in the concussion protocol, and Kenny Pickett was dealing with a rib injury. McKee was thrown onto the field without much fanfare, without external expectation, without overwhelming pressure. The opponent was the New York Giants. And what we saw was a calm quarterback, executing the game plan, avoiding major mistakes, and resisting the urge to play hero ball. It wasn't a performance that went down in history, but it was enough to show that he could operate an NFL offense with structure and composure. And most importantly, the team came out of that game healthy, rested, and mentally ready for what was next. 1 week later, the Eagles were playing in the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. And the rest is history. This is where the narrative changes completely, because the Eagles of today do not inspire the same level of confidence as the Eagles of that moment. The team entering this Week 18 is far more scrutinized, far more unstable, and far more closely examined. Offensive inconsistency has become a recurring theme throughout the season. Some weeks the offense looks unstoppable. Other weeks it simply disappears. And nothing illustrated that better than what happened in Week 17 against the Buffalo Bills. Philadelphia went into halftime with a 13-0 lead, control of the game, a comfortable advantage, the perfect setup to manage the second half. And then the second half happened. Or rather, it didn't. The Eagles' offense was completely shut down. 17 total yards in the entire second half. 5 possessions, 5 punts. A collapse that doesn't go unnoticed anywhere. But in Philadelphia, it instantly becomes fuel for question. That kind of performance creates noise. It creates doubt. And when doubt appears, it doesn't choose a single target. It spreads across the roster, the coaching staff, and inevitably, the most sensitive position in the sport, quarterback. Earlier in December, when the season seemed to be drifting toward uncertainty, there was a moment when panic set in among parts of the fan base. It wasn't official. It wasn't organizational, but anyone who follows the Philadelphia environment knows exactly what happened. Murmurs started, talk radio conversations, forum posts, questions no one wanted to ask, but that surfaced anyway. And in the middle of all that, Tanner McKee's name was mentioned in a way completely disproportionate to his actual role. Reason prevailed. Jalen Hurts remained the starter, as he always should have. There was no real movement to change that. But the mere fact that those conversations existed shows how fragile the narrative can be when performance fluctuates. And that's exactly where the danger and the opportunity of Week 18 live. If Tanner McKee plays poorly, nothing changes. The read will be simple. He's just the backup. The game didn't matter. Stick to the plan. But if McKee plays well, if he runs the offense efficiently, if the ball moves, if the team scores naturally, the situation shifts. Not because anyone rationally wants a quarterback controversy heading into the playoff, but because Philadelphia doesn't operate purely on logic. It operates on emotion, comparison, and narrative. And narrative is something you can't fully control. A strong performance from McKee doesn't create a real roster problem, but it creates noise. It creates radio show, asking what if. It creates columnists floating hypothetical. It creates fans comparing performances without context. And all of that happens at the worst possible time, the week leading into the playoff. That's why this game, which theoretically means nothing, carries enormous psychological weight. For the team, for the coaching staff, and for the overall environment. Nick Sirianni knows it, the organization, and Tanner McKee, by all indications, knows it too. His messaging isn't that of someone trying to force a narrative. He doesn't talk about changing his status or earning something bigger. He talks about preparation, about being ready every week, about doing what an NFL backup quarterback must do to survive in the league. Be reliable, be consistent, and not become a liability. Ironically, that's exactly the mindset that keeps players employed in the NFL for a long time. Teams don't look for backups who want to become stars overnight. They look for players who step in, execute, don't complicate things, and keep the plan intact. The matchup against the Washington Commanders, therefore, becomes a quiet test, not to determine the future, not to spark a competition, but to measure maturity. McKee will have the chance to show command of the huddle, defensive recognition, decision-making under pressure, and emotional control. All the things that don't show up cleanly in box score, but matter deeply inside the building. At the same time, the coaching staff will be under observation as well. Will the play calling be conservative or aggressive? Will the offense be simplified? Or will McKee be allowed to push the ball? Those choices send messages too, not to the fans, but internally. What's interesting is that despite all this subtext, the game continues to be framed publicly as something simple. A rest game, an evaluation, a preparation game. But anyone who's followed Philadelphia long enough knows that nothing here is ever just that. There's always another layer. There's always subtext. Week 18 becomes one of those moments where everyone says it doesn't matter, but everyone pays attention. Every completed pass, every successful drive, every touchdown or mistake will be interpreted somehow, not because the team needs it, but because the environment demands it. For Tanner McKee, this is a rare showcase. Backup quarterbacks don't get many opportunities to start NFL games. When they do, it usually comes in bad situations, injuries, chaos, losing streaks. This time, the opportunity arrives in a controlled setting, with a strong roster around him and without the immediate pressure of saving the season. That's a luxury, and McKee seems to be approaching it the right way. He promises nothing. He creates no artificial expectation. He simply reinforces that he's ready, as he always has been. That approach may not drive headline, but it tends to earn trust from coaches. In the end, the real question isn't whether Tanner McKee can become something more than what he currently is. The real question is what happens if he does exactly what's expected of him and does it well. Because in Philadelphia, even normalcy can become a storyline. A good performance doesn't change the starter. It doesn't change the plan. It doesn't shift the focus away from the playoff. But it does change the noise around the team. And sometimes, controlling the noise is just as important as controlling the game on the field. Week 18 doesn't affect seeding. It doesn't decide a division. It doesn't win a trophy. But it shapes narrative. It shapes perception. It builds confidence. And for Tanner McKee, it's another chance to show that he belongs in the NFL, even if he's never meant to be the name on the marquee. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think a strong performance from McKee is simply a harmless bonus that reinforces roster depth? Or do you think it creates unnecessary noise at a moment when the team needed silence and full focus heading into the playoffs? Because in Philadelphia, you know this already. Even a game that doesn't matter is never just another game.